Welcome to Confessions of an Entrepreneur, powered by RG. My name is Carl Swansbury, and I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome David Lynch onto my podcast. David is a Northeast born and bred entrepreneur who spent his early years trying to find his feet, having left school with pretty modest qualifications. Having found a real interest and love in healthcare, David went on to start up, scale up, and sell his first business, Lynch Healthcare, for millions of pounds, before then moving into a more fractional world whereby since he has been acquiring and investing in other businesses in pursuit of creating shareholder value through M&A. I'm really looking forward to understanding a bit more about the key things that David did in Lynch Healthcare that created such a large, saleable business. His now purpose, given he has financial independence, so why would he be continuing to buy, sell, and invest in other people's businesses? And I'm also really keen just to understand a little bit more about, I guess, the things that David knows now that he wished he knew when he set up his first business. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you, our viewers, on today's podcast, which for sure, for anyone who is thinking about starting up or is going through the scale-up journey, will prove invaluable. David, can I first of all just welcome you onto my Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast? I'm absolutely thrilled to have you in the hot seat today.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, Carl. It's nice to meet you in person as well.
Likewise.
Feels like we've been connected for ages,
Yeah.
but never actually met in person. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise, David. And social media is an interesting tool, isn't it? Because, of course, it's great to connect to people through LinkedIn, but you do have almost an assumed relationship with someone as a consequence of seeing their content over many years, even though today's the first time we've met and sat face to face together. So huge thanks again, David, for being on my podcast.
Yeah, delighted.
So my first question, which I think should make for a really interesting start to the conversation, is just to understand what motivates you as an entrepreneur, David, who has built up, sold, and now has acquired and invested in many businesses. What is it that's motivating you day to day?
I think it comes down to just being better in myself and trying to be better all of the time. Mm-hmm. And I think throughout the process, which I'm sure we'll get into, but there's been periods where I've had to pause and think, what do I want to do next and why? And that definitely happened after I sold my business. Yep. Took us a couple of years to kind of figure out what was going to be next. But I'm ambitious. I want to keep I want to be better. I want to push myself and see what's possible. And that's I think that's the driving factor. And that has probably been the driving factor, during the times where things weren't going as well. You dust yourself down and you think, I can do this and I can be better. And I always look for how I can be better, whether that's meeting people, listening to podcasts and stuff. I'm very into my own education and becoming a better person.
Where do you think, David, that drive to be better, that eagerness to succeed comes from? Is it nurture or is it nature in your case?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, my family, very working class. Dad didn't enjoy his job all the way through, so I kind of watched him. Sunday night, miserable.
Really?
So I watched that, and there's got to be something else. There's got to be something better. And I didn't really know how I was going to get to where I've got to, but I knew there's got to be something better than doing your 9 to 5 and being miserable and doing it just for the money. And to be fair, to put a roof over our head and give us our holiday and stuff, but still, that might be the driving factor behind it. I don't know. I've not really thought about it that much.
Interesting. Well, maybe today we can try and dig a bit deeper. But as you say, you were born and bred here in the northeast of England to a working class family. Just talk me through how you found education, David, and how you fared academically.
Yeah. struggled really. I was average at best.
Okay.
Sort of, if there was 8 sets, I was in set 4.
Yep.
Did work hard towards the end to try to get me GCSEs. Got a couple of C's, nothing fancy, but yeah, I found the learning side and the formality of it all very difficult and restrictive.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Then you went to Red House School
Red House
in the Northeast.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, for anyone who doesn't know Red House School, that's certainly a school of knocks, isn't it, in terms of being streetwise as well as educated academically at the end of your qualifications.
100%, and that's what I always say that to people. And my son, my 2 sons that are younger, that's the one thing I'm thinking they haven't got that.
Really?
And there was fights in the play yard nearly every time.
That's right.
Some hard people went to Red House Comp.
Managed
to sort of navigate it through relationships and keeping on the right side of people in football. And again, that probably stood us in good stead, who to be around, how to be around them. And I think that was probably like the start of trying to work out who I am and what I want to do.
You mentioned that your 2 boys perhaps haven't been as exposed to the sharp end as you perhaps were at Red House Comp. Does that imply that your boys go to private school and perhaps don't come into contact with some of the folk you did when you were at school?
They don't go to private. They just go to local schools at Whitburn.
Okay.
And to a point, you get some similarities.
Yes.
But not like our school was rough. It was really rough. And it was like, what's that saying? As fittest of the survivors, survivor of the fittest.
Yeah,
you had to literally, you had to survive. Otherwise, you're going to have a miserable time.
Yeah.
And they are not exposed to that, and we probably mollycoddle them a bit and sort of they're more in a bubble.
Yeah.
We were just kind of left to our own devices.
Yes. And you do wonder whether there is a correlation to some of the things you've said there and the fact that now definitely there seems to be many more instances of mental health, people perhaps not being able to cope day to day.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's in part as a consequence of a change in the level of resilience that is built into people from a young age. And of course, there are other factors at play from a health perspective, David, but I do think that might be part of it.
Yeah.
So obviously, as you say, you survived Red House Comprehensive, which I'm sure at the time in itself felt like an achievement, regardless of what GCSEs you came out with, David.
Yeah.
What did you then know was your calling? What did you then decide to put your all into after GCSEs?
Well, I still didn't know. Career service was really poor. It was like 1 session, and ultimately you just thought that you had to get a job to get paid. So I went down the apprenticeship route, engineering actually, and something I was never any good at, but did my apprenticeship, and then I left and went into something different.
And is that when you decided that perhaps being a football scout at Blackburn Rovers was the right calling? Is that
that was
there, or was that way?
That was like
before?
3 years before I sold my business that I went on to have.
So okay, right.
Yeah, no, that was still very early, and just didn't really know what my path was, and just I would say got pulled along by the journey. Just earning a bit of money, and that's what I thought, because me parents, and that's what I thought was going to be my life.
Yeah, it was almost what was expected of you, right? Leave school, son, get a job, son, and earn a living, son.
Pay board, son.
Pay board. Yeah. No, well, there you are, and we're all creatures of habit, and I guess unless you decide to be the shepherd, you are a sheep.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, you will just follow. Right, the herd, and of course that's what perhaps then everyone around you was just doing, right? So what was there a catalyst, or did something happen that sort of inspired you to not go through the motions anymore, doing a job that you didn't enjoy, and pursue setting up your own business? How did that come about?
Well, I mean, when I mentioned about my dad being unhappy on a Sunday night, going into a factory full of men that were really unhappy. As soon as the buzzer went, or 5 minutes before the buzzer went, they were washing their hands and they were out like a shot. The cars were going ballistic outside, getting home, and I was like, it just sort of amplified my thoughts around this. And this particular business, they were shutting down. Right. So I didn't have any, I had no reason to stay. Didn't have any sort of funds to come in through that. So it was just a case of looking at what was available, and there was a job came up. Is a wheelchair technician.
Okay, interesting.
For a mobility company.
Huh?
I think it was like £5 an hour. It was like, going back then, it was it was crazy, but I just did that because I wanted to try and change my environment a little bit.
Okay.
And that's kind of things led on from there, really.
Yeah, and that's how you go into healthcare.
Yeah.
For the first time. So obviously many of our viewers will know the success you had with Lynch Healthcare. So could you just talk me through how you went from taking a £5 per hour job as a wheelchair engineer to being CEO of Lynch Healthcare, which is a group that you sold?
Yeah.
What amount of time passed, and how did you navigate that material change in level and, of course, create such a significant business of value?
Yeah. So when I got into that business, there was a role came up, which was going out and assessing for the equipment, almost like a sales role, but
yes.
more demonstration and more like problem solving.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I put myself forward for that. I always remember they give me a 3 months trial. Did me 3 months trial, and it said, sorry, David, we just don't think you're suited for sales. You're too shy. You really need to come out of your shell. So I talked them into giving us another 3 months trial. And then I started to, because I probably was shy, but totally different now.
Yes.
And I did that, and I got my contract, and I went into sales in an assessment, working with like the NHS, local authorities, demonstrating equipment. So that was like a big shift from everything that was like engineering to like, getting in a van, going out, seeing people, meeting people. And that was quite a big shift for me.
Yeah, well, I guess for the first time you were seeing how you can grow a business, how you can win business from a conversation. I guess you were getting closer to the business side of employment versus doing a very narrow role, which is what you had done to that point, right?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And I think that communication piece, which I think is key, like I started to learn that, and I started to realize how important that, if I said I was going to do something, I wanted to do it.
Yes, right.
And I've got high standards. And later on, I kind of did a bit of work with a personal coach, and my thing was delivering the wow factor to people, to provide something like better.
Yes. Well, one of my good friends who's been on my Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast is Jeff Ram, who run a called Celebrity Service. And as you say, if each of your clients you don't treat as a celebrity, then you're delivering a substandard service, right? So totally love your commitment to delivering that wow factor, and of course getting that type of response from a client. And as a consequence, I can see why you'd have gone from, a rookie in a sales/consultancy environment to very quickly escalating. Yeah. So talk me through how you went from that elevated, promoted position to running a healthcare group. Yeah.
So I was doing well in that role, and I started to think, I can do this for myself. There's things I didn't like about what the company were doing and how they were doing. I was thinking, could I do this for myself? And it was quite a big move because I had a baby coming on the way.
Yeah.
The job was quite well paid because I'd worked my way up, and I thought, no, I've got to do it. So I remember like going for runs and walks and thinking about, is this the right thing to do? How do I do it? And then I decided I was going to do it.
What helped you make that decision? Because I'm sure many people who are employed, who are entrepreneurially minded, that will have an eagerness to set up a business, or this like massive internal itch to scratch. But perhaps it's the salary, it's the not knowing,
Yeah.
it's the having to be the breadwinner, which stops them. So what do you think gave you the confidence just to push yourself over the edge and go for it?
Yeah. I think as I developed into that kind of role, I started becoming a bit more, like taking more risks
Okay.
into things and quite like that. And really just sort of, started to realize that, I can push myself here and I can take a risk and I can do that. So, I mean, the next steps was interesting because I didn't have a penny behind us. And I went to the bank, RBS at the time, and they had, is it the AFG scheme?
Yes, indeed.
AFG scheme, yeah.
Price Finance Guarantee Scheme,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah. So like a match funding thing. So I think they offered 25k, but I had to put 25k in.
Right.
And I borrowed 10k off my brother and 15k off a family friend. I was down at like a friend's house over Christmas. There was a guy who had an electrical business down in London, and he was just asking what I was doing. I was like, well, I want to do this, 15k short. He had a couple of glasses of red wine. He says, oh, don't worry about it. I'll sort you out.
Right.
Next day, he rang us up. He said, where do you want the check sending?
Wow.
So he said, pay us back when you can, but promises one day you'll do for somebody else.
Wow, incredible. Love that.
So I mean, 25k, match fund, 50k, started the business from my spare bedroom in my flat in the centre of Sunderland.
Wow. And when you decided to raise money to set up your business, did you resign at that point, or were you employed while setting up the business?
No, I kind of, once I knew I had a bit of a feeling I could do this, I just resigned and went all in.
Wow.
Didn't have much money behind us, but just went with it.
And at that, I mean, I appreciate it might be difficult, David, to put yourself back in that moment, but at that time, were you nervous? Were you scared? Were you really conscious about the risk of failing, or actually were you gung-ho and did you know that this business was going to be successful? How are you feeling mindset-wise at that
confident time? Definitely confident I could do something, but also, I was conscious of the situation I was in.
Sure.
I was aware of the situation I was in, and I knew I had to hit the ground running. I had to get in there. I had to make some sales, and I had to get this business going because I didn't have that much money behind us.
Yeah, and as you say, whilst it was brilliant that your brother and the family friend was able to provide you with some seed capital, that doesn't last long in business, right? I bet you burned through that quite quickly, just in paying yourself, a standard market rate salary, let alone anything else. Okay, so of course, you had the backing of two people financially. So how did you go about creating a plan that you genuinely knew was capable of being executed? Because a lot of people talk about business planning.
Yeah.
And some people think you have to have a very complete, very considered, detailed business plan and forecast. Some people actually think the opposite, which is that can be quite restrictive, quite suffocating. I wing it.
Yeah.
Or fake it till you make it. So what approach did you choose to take?
Well, I got, the BIC in Sunderland.
Indeed.
It was like one of those sort of little grants to help you write the business plan.
Good.
And when I was doing it, I was thinking this is very formal and like I just need to get on with it. So I didn't really follow the business plan. It was my first experience of putting something formal together.
Sure.
But it was a case of, right, I've got to get out. I've got to see me potential customers. I've got to get brochures and flyers out, and I've got to make this happen.
Yes. I guess at the very least, maybe that business planning exercise helped you prioritize, if nothing else. I mean, it sounds like you probably wrote the business plan and then ignored the business plan, but it will have helped you decide the things that need to be done in what order, which in itself was probably the benefit. Okay, so in that first year of running your own business, was there any events, or was there ever a time, David, where you regretted the decision you had made?
Never regretted it, no.
And was there ever a time where you regretted having not made the decision sooner? You kicked yourself that perhaps you should have done this 5 years before.
No, I wouldn't say
it felt like the right time.
I felt that I was on the verge of like my experience level was just about enough to do this.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't have even thought about it before.
Okay, totally appreciate that. So end of year one, where had you gotten to?
Yeah, so I got the business about 400,000 in revenue.
Fantastic.
And it was tough because getting the right suppliers on board.
Well.
You know, as a startup, we were paying pro forma for things.
Yeah, you weren't getting credit, right?
We weren't getting credit lines. It was tough, but the customers that I built up in that previous role were loyal to me.
Yeah.
I was delivering a good service.
Yeah.
They wanted to continue with that. So that's what really helped. And a bit of luck along the way. There was a couple of hospital wings, day centres that I remember. There was a day centre, quite a big day centre down in Hartlepool, and I had a flood and I had to replace all of the equipment, and they came to me to sort of do that project. So it was like, first time I'd ever sent an invoice out. Like I literally was just learning on the job.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously you talked earlier, David, about always wanting to deliver a celebrity service, quoting on Jeff Ram, or indeed, I think you said, a wow factor. So that would have been one of the reasons why your previous clients followed you, so to speak. But are there any other reasons why you think in that first year clients trusted you as a startup with limited means?
I think maybe they just saw that I was a genuine person trying to do good and trying to help people, because the sector that we were in is a very caring sector.
Yes.
We were going out to see very severely disabled people. And people think the mobility space or for the elderly, but actually like young children.
That's right.
And so I think that the same that I had the empathy, but I was, my skill set was quite interchangeable. I could be that really caring person, delicately fitting a product with a person, but then being able to go away and deliver and get the quote to them and sort of find the best solution. I never sort of try to pretend I was someone I wasn't. And if I didn't know the answers, I was always taught by somebody, if you don't know the answers, just let them know. But you'll go away and you'll find out how to sort of solve the problem.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's right. That's right. And let me ask a question, because you've said something which is really interesting, and I'm sure many of our viewers will relate. To succeed in business, you have to have many skills, don't you?
Yeah.
And when it comes to communicating, I think you have to be empathetic. You have to truly, sincerely care, but you also at times have to be sharp, direct, persuasive. You have to be able to negotiate, which does require positioning and tactical skills and capabilities. So let me ask, do you feel that these are just skills you have, and therefore you are being your true self when you are being chameleon-like in these different situations? Or actually, are these things you've taught yourself to do because you have to do them to get on in business?
No, I think a lot of that came natural.
Right, okay.
Like I'm a natural problem solver. I'm a good communicator. So these are all things that I realised I had by just pushing myself into that environment.
Right, okay.
But of course, there's things I had to work on as well, and things I wanted to learn. But those like core principles, I think, of being an entrepreneur, like the risk taking, the delivering a good service, the sort of finding the solutions to people's problems.
Yes.
I think that's realised that came natural to me.
And as you were, after year one, growing the business, I guess I've got two questions. First of all, when did you acknowledge that you needed to bring into the business people who have strengths, skills, and experiences that you didn't have? And I guess linked to that, it would just be fascinating to understand whether you feel now, on reflection, you would have achieved what you have done without those individuals in the business?
Yeah. Well, I knew I needed people to help. What I didn't know at that time is what that profile should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said there, people that were maybe had different skills to yourself. So that was probably the biggest mistake I made. A lot of entrepreneurs, I think, make this mistake to try and bring people in that are exactly like you.
That's right. That's right.
If you like them and you got on and they were, right, you've got the job, without any real kind of understanding.
That's right.
So so it wasn't until later on that I realized I needed people around me that had different skill sets.
Yeah, I think, as you say, David, it's something that many entrepreneurs learn from lived experience. And by that I mean, when you are early on in your journey, not only do you recruit people like you because you get on with them, there's an immediate connection, but worse still, a lot of entrepreneurs will recruit people early who agree with their business plan, who are not willing to disagree and challenge the business plan. But of course, you now know that you'd actually recruit the absolute opposite profile of individual now. People who will challenge you, people who've got more experience than you, because you benefit from that. And of course, perhaps you only know that with the benefit of hindsight. So I'm going to fast forward now a decade or so, intentionally. What was the one thing when you started to get to a position where you were considering the sale of the business? What was the one thing that, looking back, you could have done that would have moved the needle on value? And of course, I appreciate the answer is many things, but just when you reflect on selling the business and what you sold the business for, is there one thing that you now know, what could have really materially impacted the valuation you achieve, and therefore it's something you would have implemented if you had your time again?
I would say it has to be the M&A side that I'm now involved with.
Interesting.
Because I never give that it didn't even come into my radar.
Right.
You just think you've got to build a business organically, win more customers, win more contracts, develop your product portfolio, all of that sort of stuff. And you don't give it a second. A lot of people wouldn't think that, well, if I acquire a business, I can go from here to here quicker. And, but one thing I will say, it's worth mentioning, when I started the business, I always had a dream of selling the business by the time I was 40.
Okay.
So I was 29 when I started.
Yeah.
I didn't know how I was going to get there. Didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't really know what that looked like, but I had a dream of selling the business for a lot of money and having like a lifestyle where, I didn't have to work and stuff like that.
And why do you think when you set up the business, 40 years of age was that line in the sand there? Why 40? Why not 50 or any other age?
I don't know.
Interesting.
I was 29. I was thinking, well, round numbers maybe.
Yeah.
30's a bit soon.
That's right. That's right. Maybe close enough to inspire you, but far enough away to actually achieve it.
Yeah.
Perhaps is why you gave yourself 10 and a bit years.
Yeah.
And of course, I know when you sold your business, so congratulations on achieving that incredibly inspiring goal of building a business from scratch and selling it before your 40th birthday. Conscious that this will be confidential, but what can you tell us about the scale of the business when you sold it, and therefore perhaps the likely financial reward you were able to realize, David, for yourself?
Yeah, so I think we got the business up to about 18 million in revenue. That was across a few different things, because what we'd done is we had a big part of the business was contracts with the NHS, and we grew nationwide. So we had contracts from the Northeast all the way down to London. That was a big part. But we also manufactured products ourselves, and we manufactured products from Sunderland. So that was like another sort of area of growth within the business. Then there was the e-commerce side. So what I managed to do, the reason I'm saying this is I managed to sort of build each of these areas up because they all had different value.
Yes.
And I didn't really know at the time, but I now know that the contracts, it's repeatable, recurring revenue. These contracts were 3 + 1 + 1, 5-year contracts, and we had them across the country. So although I didn't really know, it wasn't really intentional, I was building something up that was going to be very attractive to a buyer. Obviously, closer to the time, I put a bit more time into understanding what a buyer might be looking for. So we had a good a good sort of mix of different sales channels, different ways of doing business, different margins. Obviously, the manufacturing, high margin, contracts, slightly lower margin. E-commerce, again, a completely different world. The contracts with a local authority, the e-commerce was to private individuals. So we built quite a good ecosystem within the business. So we got the 8 million revenue, and by the time I sold, which was October 2020, and yeah, that process in itself was the first time I've been through it. It was interesting, but it was a good process. It was enjoyable, actually. Learned a lot from the process.
And obviously, when you sold the business in October 2020, which was really still in the middle of COVID and lockdown, you achieved your goal of selling a business before your 40th birthday. Let me ask, was the plan for you to remain involved in the business, running the business under the ownership of a third party, or was the plan something different?
No, and that's something I now know is quite unique.
Yes.
Which again, I didn't know. I wanted to leave the business on day one. I wanted that exit, but I was told that would be very difficult to achieve. But I think with the contracts we had and how we set the business up, the management team was key. They all stayed on. I was able to leave on day one, and I did like a 12-month consultancy agreement where they just got in touch with me when they needed me help and support. But that enabled me to move on to that next chapter.
Yes.
And that's where, when you talk about the value of the business, what I was offered is what I accepted. And that was going to set me up for the future.
So obviously, David, in my day job as an M&A advisor and on my Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast, I'm always talking to entrepreneurs like you about building a business, acknowledging the blood, the sweat, the tears, the sacrifice, the hard yards that goes into that. And of course, getting to this inflection point where there is a transaction on the horizon. Of course, you sold your business for millions of pounds, which as a 40-year-old would have gave you financial independence, right? Beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
How did it actually feel the day when X millions of pounds was in your current account? Was it absolutely utopia, or was it a bit of a damp squib, almost like New Year's Eve, the anticipation of midnight, but really 1 minute past midnight, it's the same world and we do the same things. How did it actually truly feel?
I felt emotional, very emotional. And it sounds crazy, I wasn't thinking about the money. Like, what did I do the next day? It was actually COVID as well. So, right. Couldn't just...
Limited options.
But it was emotional, and it was a sense of pride and a sense of achievement. And I was like, I can't believe I've done it.
Yeah, wow.
And that's... I remember we were down the lawyer's office on the Friday afternoon, and me and my wife, Emma, we just opened a bottle of champagne on the night, and we're just sitting, we're thinking, wow, what's next?
Yeah, wow.
And we genuinely didn't know what was next.
Incredible. And did it give you the anticipated feeling of not being any longer financially exposed? So, you talked earlier about, wanting to be financially independent, right? When you sold your business, did you just feel that never again would you have to think about money? Because of course you had more money than you could arguably ever spend if you were sensible. Is that how you felt, or really did that not even cross your mind, even though that's what you mentioned when you said the business was your motivator to create financial independence for your family?
Yeah, I mean, that was great. And at the time, I didn't really know what was going to be next with that. But the biggest sense of relief was probably that responsibility. I always felt responsibility for the customers and the suppliers and the staff. And those are the three things that I said I don't want to get back into. I don't want to be back in a business environment where I am responsible for the staff, where I have to deal with the customers and I have to deal with the suppliers.
Interesting.
Because I found those three things are what takes over your life.
Yeah. No, well, you're right.
It's not-
You've described that many of the different stakeholders attaching to a business, be it suppliers, be it customers, be it employees, be it investors, if you had investors in your cap table, but I'm conscious you didn't within Lynch Healthcare. And actually, it is such a burden, isn't it? It's really also rewarding and inspiring, but actually it's really difficult to have to manage all of those stakeholders interchangeably.
Yeah.
Because they all arguably want something quite different.
Yeah.
So I can see why perhaps you decided when selling your first business that not being operationally accountable to those stakeholder groups is something you would inspire to. Because truth be known, I suspect most entrepreneurs would agree. So, sold your business at 40, probably celebrated by having a trip to the end of the garden. But of course, it was mid-COVID, so no international flights allowed, of course. So how long did you sit literally in the garden for before working out what comes next for David?
I experimented for about 3 years. And you mentioned the football. I was involved in football, in scouting and recruitment. Thought that's what I wanted to do full time.
Where did that come from? Because that's totally not linked to anything.
No, I've always loved football. Me boys just involved in football. Didn't like the coaching, but quite like the scouting.
Okay,
so
interesting.
Sort of kind of experiment with that, but realised I was just going into another job.
Yes.
Where I was dealing with staff and customers.
Right.
It's the same thing in football. So yeah, I was experimenting. I was doing a lot of research.
Yep.
I was learning about stuff. That's when I started to learn about M&A. I was intrigued by my process. I'd seen like webinars and courses and there was people in the space on my LinkedIn who were buying businesses. So it was more just let's see what this is all about. So I was just experimenting with things like that, understanding things that I didn't have time or even it just weren't on my radar. Understanding what money really is. Like, you know, even just taking a bit of a back step. Obviously, I'd done well financially, and it was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to invest? You know, where's the world going? And like AI wasn't really something then, but I was looking at all different areas like the blockchain. I was looking at Bitcoin, things that I just were away from my radar previously. And I really enjoyed that, and I started to learn.
I can imagine you did, because really up until that point, because you'd been all in on one business, you probably didn't have mental capacity and the physical time to get to understand and learn more about other sectors.
Yeah.
Because when you are the founder, CEO of a business, that's something that's all consuming, isn't it? 24/7, 7 days a week. You know, you can never switch off, I find. So as you say, it was probably the first time in your life as a mature adult with means that you had that time.
Yeah.
So as you say, it would have been a real luxury, and I can see why you got lost in that research phase, because there's so many really interesting sectors to look into. And of course, as you say, because you've been through a sale process yourself, you probably were able to appreciate how your advisors helped you add value to selling your business, and therefore could you do something similar, but as an investor, not as an advisor. So of course, tell me how you went about getting from that research phase, if we call it research, or that sort of blue sky thinking time, to setting up Kong Investments, which of course is now your vehicle, which you use to buy and invest in other people's businesses, right?
Yeah.
So how did that like sort of tangibly come about?
Yeah, just that research continued. I've got myself a mentor who was acquiring businesses.
Who was that?
He was called Paul Seabridge.
Oh, yes, okay.
Doing a lot of like leverage buyouts, which again, didn't even know what they were. Yeah. And understanding that there's creative ways to do things. And that was the real like penny dropped moment where I was like, you don't like when you're buying a house, you don't have to, you get a mortgage. Even if you've got the money, unlikely you're going to pay cash. So, and then if you're going to buy more properties, so the same sort of applies to business.
Yes.
And he was very creative in the structures, and some of the education that I did was all around what they call like the deal pie and different ways of being able to structure finance deals, just things that would have gone over my head. And I started to really think, well, maybe I'm not finished in business yet.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I get back into business, but I'd look to do a buy and build. I've got the experience of how to do it organically. So I've got the experience of adding value. But could I go bigger than I did the first time, and could I go faster? And that was like chapter 2. That was the challenge I set myself.
Love that. The idea of leveraging what you have learned, but to build a bigger, better business in a shorter time frame. Because of course, the only commodity really that we will ever want more of is time.
Yeah.
Right. And what you're trying to do is achieve the scaling of a business, but by narrowing the time horizon.
Yeah.
Which is something that's really important to me, actually, because truly time is the only commodity I value personally. You've mentioned 2 things there, and I'm just going to talk about one of them for a brief moment, which is people's knowledge of and relationship with money, specifically things like leverage.
Yeah.
The idea of not wanting debt, which is something that most people weirdly strive towards.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is so counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
A sensible level of leverage means you can run faster over a shorter period of time. So I think definitely people need to be educated, I think, early on in their journey as to what a sensible, optimized level of leverage looks like and means.
Yeah.
Because taking on no debt will probably always mean you'll suffocate your business's potential to scale, certainly within a time horizon which is considered sensible. I think the other thing that you mentioned there, David, which is really interesting, is how you can bring together businesses to create a more meaningful group, benefiting not only from efficiencies and shared knowledge and resources, but more importantly, the arbitrage effect, which of course is all about creating a group that can be sold for a higher multiple as a consequence of scale alone.
Yeah.
So obviously, since founding Kong, I know that you've acquired a number of businesses in healthcare and M&E. So what does that group now look like of the businesses you've bought or invested in?
Yeah, so I started off with no real plan around sectors.
Mm-hmm.
I got involved in a commercial cleaning company.
Interesting.
Electrical contracting, electrical compliance, so like mechanical and electrical based businesses. And then my business partner now in the mobility healthcare group, Ross, had a business that in my old sector that were looking to retire. The owners were looking to retire. And it was just at the right time when my non-compete was coming to an end. So, originally I was thinking I'm done with healthcare. But I ended up acquiring that business, which we completed at the back end of last year, which is like a 135-year-old business in Scotland. And then I got involved in an occupational therapy business and case management. So very similar again. And I found myself drawn back into healthcare, which I'm really excited about because of all these new skills that I've got. That's what really excites me. So I've acquired full and part companies in electrical and mechanical. I'm coming out of those and I'm moving 100% into healthcare. So I'm actually doing my first raise for 41 Kong to have a bit of capital to assist with the acquisitions and just help us go that little bit quicker.
Yeah, understand.
Probably a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really inspiring and really interesting. I guess the only thing I'll ask is, obviously you've mentioned that you've bought and invested in a variety of businesses, sort of M&E and healthcare, but where you've gotten to now is you're going to double down on healthcare. And is that because that's where your interest lies, that's where your experience lies, and that's where you find most enjoyment? Is that why you have decided to really narrow your focus now on healthcare?
I think it's just moving forward with speed.
Yes.
And I think the next target's 2030. I'll be 50.
There's a theme, like a theme.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a case of speed.
Yes.
And with the healthcare sector, I don't really have to spend much time understanding. I kind of know it. Somebody says something, somebody shows us, I just know it.
There you go. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of entrepreneurs will build and sell a business, and then they'll say, well, I've sold a business for 50 million. I'm now going to invest in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'm now going to invest in renewable energy.
Yeah.
I'm now going to buy a PR agency.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, you do wonder whether that's the right strategy, because, of course, they often have no knowledge of the aforementioned sectors, and therefore they are trusting management teams to have the knowledge, which means your ability to influence the business is more limited, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I suspect what you're definitely saying is you feel, because of the knowledge you have in healthcare, you can add more value and create more value within a shorter time frame than in other sectors where you have perhaps less knowledge or interest.
Yes, exactly.
Makes sense.
And I think I'm nicely placed to be more strategic now and not be at all operational.
Yes.
At all.
Yes. And obviously you've bought and invested in a number of businesses now, and I know that each will have a story, because each acquisition or investment I've advised on has. But is there any theme that has come out of the businesses you've bought or invested in, which you're now really focused in on when looking at other businesses to buy or invest in, David? Are there any themes now that each and every time are going to come to the surface?
Well, I think, Carl, it's about like creating that model that works. Finances was never my strong point. So quite quickly got the right people around me to help that side of it.
Good.
And we've got a model now that we just really confident works.
Yep.
And if a business doesn't fit that criteria, we're not we're not trying to force it.
Yeah.
We're not, this model works, so let's continue. So it's about having the conversations with business owners, establishing, is there a good fit? And then bringing in the people around me to have those conversations around the numbers and the structure. So I think the model that we've created, I feel really confident about, and it works.
Yeah. As you know, David, having set up, scaled up over just beyond a decade and having sold Lynch Healthcare, you know yourself, the pride, the love, the care, the attachment that you had for your business. So with that in mind, how do you go about making sure when you're buying these founder-led businesses that the care, consideration, love, and duty of care that these founders have, you are able to, as custodian, take forward in a positive way? Because often in M&A transactions, I think the thing that is often not given the right amount of time and attention is the succession planning element, the management element, and how to make sure that the IP that resides in the people doesn't leak out of the business the day after someone's acquired it. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, that transition piece post-acquisition is really tricky, and it's something that I'm learning. But we appointed in the mobility group, which is called Advanced Healthcare, we appointed a really good MD who went into the business and basically got the team on board, listened to the team, spent time with the team, and really got them on board. And we've actually promoted from within. Mainly, we've promoted within. We've put a few sort of we've taken a few people on from the outside, but we've mainly promoted within. And I think that's been absolutely key to getting the buy-in from the staff. And the staff, we're looking for somebody to come in with new ideas, a new perspective, and that marriage, it's worked well so far. I haven't got a lot of experience of, I'm learning as I go with this.
Sure.
And I'm sure it'll be tricky ones, but I like to think we do a good job of the DD, operationally, really understand the business, understand the people, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both the people in the business and the systems and the processes and what teams are already in there.
Yep.
And by doing that, you kind of know what you're getting.
Yep.
Then you just have to find the right people to execute. Because for me, I'm not going up to Scotland. I'm not meeting the staff. I'm not spending any time with the staff. So the people that represent Advanced Healthcare Group have to be the right people. And then we spend a bit of time with those people, once a week.
Yeah.
How's everything going? What support do you need? What can we do to support that journey? Get them to buy in the bigger vision. And develop them. So the MD that has gone into there is looking to move into more of an MD group role. We're acquiring our second business in that space. That deal is going on as we speak. So he's been involved in the DD. He's been to meet the staff, the key people in the business. He's been on site, and he knows, and he fed that back to us.
I'm going to take us back to a question I asked you right at the beginning, actually, because I'd love to now just see whether you have any more insights to perhaps share, maybe an hour into the conversation. I asked, what motivates you? Why do you do what you do? Because you could now just retire, sit on a beach with your beautiful wife and enjoy life without the hardship of investing in and acquiring businesses and managing all of the stakeholders attaching to those transactions, because that's no mean feat. So given you've now got financial independence, given you now don't need to do what you're doing, why are you doing what you are doing?
Yeah.
There must be a reason.
Well, I remember a point in, I think it was around 2023, and we went over to Dubai with a family. I had like 4 weeks out there. I actually spoke at like an event, and I remember thinking, what am I doing with my life? Like,
Isn't purpose? What's my purpose?
yeah, what's my purpose? What I didn't want to happen is to be sitting a 60, 70-year-old and thinking, well, David, you did great to this point. Well done. What did you do after that?
Yeah.
Because time just flies by. There's only so many walks you can do.
That's right.
There's so many podcasts to listen to. And I was like, I'm not finished. I had a burning desire to go again bigger. And I think it's when I discovered M&A and discovered that actually there's another way of being able to scale something. And that excited me. And that was going to be a challenge. It is a challenge, but it's a challenge that I'm absolutely loving. And genuinely, I've never enjoyed life as much as I enjoy now, because I've just got it in a really good place. Like things, family, being able to do things, do nice things together, but also challenge myself. And, I want to be sitting here again, 2030, maybe we'll put it in the diary.
Absolutely did it.
And see what I've achieved through a buy and build strategy as opposed to an organic strategy.
That's right, which is so different, right? And as we talked about earlier, you can be highly successful in one sector and highly unsuccessful in another.
Yeah.
Building a business organically is very different to building a group through M&A.
Yeah.
And a lot of buy and builds will never go on to transact at a group level, because actually often what they are under the bonnet is a collection of irrelated, non-integrated assets, none of which strategically or operationally or from a management perspective should be together as one, which is why you see lots of carve-ups of groups on the back of unsuccessful buy and builds. So as you say, you are probably inspired by what is a very new challenge, but in a sector where you have heaps and heaps of experience and knowledge. You said something which was actually genuinely, I think, really inspiring and just worth reflecting on, actually. You said that, you've had a phenomenal 12-year run with your first business, which, of course, you sold, Lynch Healthcare. And that's one chapter of your life. But, of course, one chapter doesn't make for a best-selling book. Yeah. It has to have many chapters, and you are now in a different chapter of your book, right? And all chapters have to be as interesting, as colourful. Some will have big wins, some will have life lessons, but hey, that's what makes for a phenomenal book. As you said, when you have sold your group on your 50th birthday, we will reconvene on my podcast, David. But one last question for today, because we haven't talked a lot about your wife, your boys, and I guess how they have observed and how they have supported and how they have encouraged you as an entrepreneur along the way, right? Well, specifically your wife, who of course has been by your side throughout. So my question is, when you look back at your life to this point, are there any regrets that you have when it comes to the sacrifices you've made? And in turn, what message would you give to any entrepreneur watching this podcast who is about to resign from employment to set up their first business to pursue what you've achieved?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I've always been very good at getting that balance. I don't think I can genuinely say I've missed a football game, a school appointment, or whatever it may be. I've always prioritized me life and me family over me business. So I would say if I can do that, you can do that.
Yes.
And I think that takes discipline.
It does. It does.
And one of my favorite quotes is, plan your diary around your happiness. Don't plan your happiness around your diary.
Interesting.
So it's getting your priorities right. It's the business is still going to do, and you're going to be able to achieve what you want to do in your business. You'll find a way, but don't let that get in the way of having a life.
Yeah.
Because it's your life and your people around you that you bring along in this journey. You don't do it alone. And I think I've always, go back all the way. Somebody asks me to do something, the first thing I'll do is I'll look at my son's football fixtures, or I'll look at what else we're doing, and then I'll say yes.
I mean, really inspiring. And of course, as you say, it's about discipline, but it's self-discipline, isn't it?
Yeah,
because if you don't value your time and you give it away freely, people will take advantage. So you do have to be disciplined. You do have to value your time. And as you say, you've got to prioritize, albeit we know, don't we, that when you're building a business, that's really hard at times, because sometimes when everyone goes home and the lights are switched off, the book stops with you.
Yeah, you've got to do what you want to do. And I think there's maybe a little bit of selfishness in me as well. The right type.
Yes.
Where I'll do what I want to do. And I think I've always done what I want to do. And I think that maybe that's you said at the start, the nurture. The nature over the nurture. I think that's in me nature I'll find a way of doing it. Not to the detriment of other people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in business often, or actually in competitive sport, we talk about win and lose. And there's no middle ground. You either win or lose. The concept of both sides winning isn't really a thing. Certainly not in sport, right? But actually, I think in business, win-win is possible. And you don't have to sacrifice to succeed. So Sarah Davies, one of my really good friends who was on my podcast recently, she talked quite passionately about the fact that she does not spend as much time with her children as some of her friends do. But the time she spends is focused, concentrated, and she's fully present. Point being, she doesn't feel she's sacrificing anything.
Yeah.
Because the quality of the time is what she values, not the quantity of time. And, a lot of people talk about work-life balance, and, the implication there is work-life balance means you work 9 to 5 and then the rest of the time you're not at work. But that isn't balance at all, is it? That's just a sort of binary set of guidelines which really shouldn't be stuck to, in my opinion, because, hey, some days I'm very at ease doing a 15-hour day in business because I'll have really exciting podcasts, or I'll be working with a client on an acquisition, or I'll be down in London helping a client do an equity raise. So I'm doing those things because I really want to do those things.
Yeah.
Will I see my daughter? No. But will I see her the following day and do bath time? Of course. Yeah. And therefore, for me, that's awesome balance. But for some people, that's perhaps, not considered balance. But I think the point you've made, which is something we should all really think about, is you need to be clear as to what your priorities are. And you've got to find a balance that works for you.
And just finally, I know we'll come to the end, but I think that win-win point, I think if there's one thing that I've learned the most over the years, is to create that win-win scenario. In deal making, it's absolutely key. You need to sit down with the people and think, well, what do you want? What do we want? Let's find a way of making it happen. Yeah. And I think in the early days, it was more about like what I wanted.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think you're totally right, David. And, you will, over the years, have met lots of corporate finance advisors, corporate lawyers, tax advisors, VCT or private equity investors. And clearly everyone is different, but many like to focus on points of principle. Many like to win. Many like to be able to marginalize people because they believe that makes them look good. But of course, when the dust settles, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'd rather be respected and liked than to be disliked but having won. And again, everyone is entitled to be different, but I think if we're playing the long game in life, which we all are, because we all start at the start line and we all end in the ground. So for sure, if we're all playing the same long game, then win-win has to make for a more content, harmonious, enjoyable life, you would think, despite perhaps on a daily basis, people demonstrating attributes which would suggest otherwise.
Well, I think it's the people that you're around as well.
Of course it is.
That's absolutely key. Yeah.
I do have one last question. And it's a question that I'm really intrigued to get your perspective on, actually. If you today were to go to sleep this evening and not wake up tomorrow, what was the one thing that you would want everyone to remember you by?
Ambition. I think ambition. And what's the word? You might be able to help us out with the right word here, but just inspiring others.
Yes.
To go from where I went, from somebody who didn't do very well at school, struggled with the education, to all the way through to scaling, exiting, and then acquiring. I think it's like I want people to, it's possible.
Yeah.
And that's that. I do a bit of mentoring. I have my own little community of entrepreneurs, and that's the one thing I try and get across. It's possible. You just need to want it enough, and don't give up. And I think that's what I'd like to be remembered by.
Well, I think that's a really inspiring, considered, really thoughtful way to want to be remembered. And I'm sure based on this podcast alone, everyone would agree that those would be attributes that would be on your final tombstone. But for now, David, thanks so much for joining me on my Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast.
Delighted. Thank you very much.
It has been an absolute pleasure today having David Lynch on my Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast. It was really interesting to hear a little bit more about David's upbringing in a very working class, northeast family environment, whereby perhaps through school, academically, he didn't do too well. But actually, he learned some life skills as to how to survive in the playground, how to deal with difficult people, and of course, perhaps how to navigate the good, the bad, and then the ugly, which of course, I'm sure now in everyday life, we all appreciate are people that we come across. Like many people, David found his feet post-school doing a job he didn't enjoy, with no real qualifications to elevate in a short period of time. But I guess it was that lack of purpose which really encouraged David to search for what he enjoyed and, as a consequence, what he was good at, which is what took him into the healthcare space. Of course, we talked a little bit about David's real itch for setting up a business, being the person who was able to take control over his own destiny versus working for others, which of course is what inspired him to leave employment, to go on to set up, scale up, and in just north of 10 years sell Lynch Healthcare for millions and millions of pounds, not only meaning David was able to achieve his objective of selling a business before his 40th birthday, but also gave him the financial independence that perhaps has led to him now being able to go on to invest in and acquire other businesses. It was really inspiring to hear a little bit more about how David has gone about learning on the job, acknowledging that, you know what, there's no better experience than lived experience. And whilst, yes, listening to a podcast or reading a book helps, fundamentally, the time you learn is when you do. And of course, having now bought and invested in many businesses, David's developed a blueprint or a playbook as to what is important when it comes to buying businesses and making sure that those businesses go on and prosper. David clearly is a guy who values time. He also absolutely prioritizes putting his family first, acknowledging there'll be times where he might not spend the amount of time with his family that he chooses to, but nonetheless, I guess what goes in must come out, and as a consequence, his hard work, his focus, his resilience, and his absolute ambition to succeed are all of the traits that definitely, to this point, have made David a successful entrepreneur. I personally also will take away the fact that whilst David feels, having built and sold one business, he has delivered a phenomenal chapter in his life book. Of course, no great best-selling book will only ever have one chapter, and his now purpose is about making sure he fills the pages of his other chapters, which will make his life book colourful, varied, inspiring, and a legacy to leave his children, his wife, and of course, all of his colleagues, friends around him. The final thing that I will take away, and therefore I hope you, our viewers, will take away from today's podcast, is David's honesty, his absolute willingness to speak freely, and his very no-nonsense approach to business. I think too often in business, people are concerned about what people think. People say things not because they want the message to land, but because they are trying to manage a set of circumstances or perhaps are being political. David is not guilty of those things. He speaks with respect, he's conscientious, but he's direct, highly clear, and that for sure, for me, is probably the super strength that David has leveraged throughout his entire life to this point, which has made him the successful entrepreneur he is. It's been a pleasure having you, our viewers, join us on today's Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcast. If you would like to download this podcast or any other podcast from our Confessions of an Entrepreneur series, then please do so from wherever you download or consume your podcasts from. But it has genuinely been a pleasure having you join us today, and I really look forward to welcoming each and every one of our viewers back to future Confessions of an Entrepreneur podcasts.